And can I begin by congratulating my honourable friend for Inverclyde for securing this debate. Can I also thank members on all sides of the House for supporting the early day motions which I tabled in the last Parliament and in this Parliament to save general election night, both of which were supported by the honourable member for Brentwood and Ongar as one of the first 6 names on that. Of course, this is an important issue to us all personally, and I think it should be an issue that is important to the whole country and not just to politicians. How have we reached the point where returning officers responsible for only about half of the seats in this House have today decided to count votes immediately following the close of polls? We all know by now that the list of excuses that have been put forward by returning officers for delaying the count, and my honourable friend and the honourable member for Brentwood and Ongar have referred to them. It's not just about the counting of postal votes themselves. If it was simply about counting postal votes, then that would have no impact whatever on the time it takes to come up with an election result. What is being suggested by returning officers is that it is the validation of the postal ballots in advance of the count that is causing concern and could cause a delay of the count until the next day. Because of course, even the next general election, whenever it is, it's hardly likely that turnout in that general election will be anything like the high 70s or early 80% turnouts that we saw in the 50s and 60s, even with an increase in postal ballots. So the total number of votes that returning officers and their staff will have to count will be significantly reduced from previous years. It's the validation that is the problem. And when the Interim Electoral Management Board of Scotland issued their consultation paper, they did highlight this problem, that, and I quote, a significant percentage of the total number of postal ballots cast in each election would be submitted or would be expected to be submitted on polling day itself. It is very important to note that the Interim Electoral Management Board didn't give a specific figure at all about the number of ballot papers or even the percentage of ballot papers that they expected to be submitted on polling day itself. And the reason to do this is everyone who has taken part in any election campaign will know that the numbers of ballot papers which are actually submitted on polling day, even today, even when we've had a vast increase in the number of people who apply for postal ballots, is insignificant. And it is simply not the case that there are so many postal ballots submitted on polling day. They have to be validated, the signatures have to be checked. There is no question that there are so many such votes submitted on polling day before office hours close at 5 o'clock that would in any way affect the timious result. Yes, of course.
You're quite right that the postal vote ballot paper is being used as a reason, perhaps an excuse. But another one is a separation of ballot papers should there be a local government election on the same day. Now, my own experience of this in both 2001 and 2005 was it was more than possible to do that separation. And in our case, there is now a culture, if there is a general election and the local government election is on the same night, to count the local government election ballots the following morning.
My honourable friend has absolutely made the right suggestion as far as having elections for 2 different bodies on the same day. Certainly in Glasgow and in Scotland, it's natural practice whenever the Scottish Parliament elections have been held on the same day as local elections up until 2007, that the local elections are announced the next day, but the Scottish Parliament election results are announced the night before. Another reason, another excuse that has been suggested by returning officers for delaying the count is cost. They don't want the returning officers don't mind accepting the extra payment themselves, of course, but they don't want to pay their lower paid staff the extra money that they would get for performing overtime duties, and therefore they're expected to do the counting in their own office time on the Friday, and that's all very well, except those staff who are counting ballot papers on the Friday would normally be doing something else. They would normally be doing their other duties which they are paid for. When will those duties be carried out if they're now to count ballot papers on the Friday? There is no cost saving, at least no significant cost saving in that one. I think that's a red herring. But my favourite excuse so far, Mr. Wiltshire, is health and safety. Now, I'm not aware of many people who actually do the counting of the ballot papers fainting or dropping down dead. I'm not saying there are no pools of blood on the floor of the Scottish Exhibition and Conference Centre in Glasgow when the Glasgow seats are counted, but that is largely the result of frank and firm exchanges between candidates rather than a plethora of paper cuts to the people that are actually doing the counting. And I think this is another tremendous red herring. Now, the Gould report that was commissioned following the unfortunate delays and problems that we had with the 2007 Scottish Parliament election results has been quoted as another excuse for not holding election counts immediately after the polls closed. And as my honourable friend from Inverclyde has said, and he was probably more close than he would like to remember to the debacle at the time, as he has pointed out, not responsible for it, but certainly very familiar with what occurred in May 2007. And as he has pointed out on a number of occasions, despite the Interim Electoral Board quoting Ron Gould at the beginning of their consultation document, and his quote is saying that there should not be overnight counts anymore, it is a fact that what went wrong in 2007, the breakdown of the counting machines, the confusion of the ballot papers, would have occurred anyway. All that would have, delaying the count until the Friday would have had absolutely no effect on a single ballot paper had that count been delayed until Friday. Now, we talk about accountability, Mr. Wiltshire, and that is the title of this debate. As my honourable friend has said, the government should not run election counts, and returning officers' operational duties must be seen to be utterly immune from political interference. However, it has been suggested that there might be a way of phrasing some kind of amendment to the constitutional reform bill that is currently before the Commons in order to place some kind of duty on returning officers to make every effort to count as soon as possible after the polls closed. And in his wind-up comments, I would appreciate it if the Minister could give some kind of indication whether or not he believes that such an opportunity might avail itself next week, and I would be more than happy to table such an amendment if that was deemed appropriate. Yes, there is arrogance, there is high-handedness among returning officers who, of course, are all paid, certainly in Scotland, all paid six-figure sums for their day job, which is as a chief executive of a council. If they really believe that this job is beyond them, if they cannot cope with the responsibility of conducting a punctual count of ballot papers immediately after the polls closed, if their other duties as the chief executives of important local authorities delivering important services for local people, if that job is far too important and that they cannot spend too much time in actually doing the job of a returning officer, then, as the Honourable Member for Brentwood Nonger has said, there are other people out there who would be willing to take up the reins of this particular job. And if they can't do it, other people will, I am sure, step forward. Very briefly, Mr. Wiltshire, I just want to talk about why it is important we have the count immediately after polling. There is an entertainment value. The Honourable Member for Brentwood Nonger seemed almost to dismiss this. It shouldn't be dismissed. The general election count is an event, television. It's a television event which is important. We should not underestimate the value of making politics entertaining, even gripping. We shouldn't dismiss that at a time when engagement in politics is, by all accounts, fading. My earliest political memory is of keeping my mum company in the early hours of a Friday morning on the sofa when everyone else had given up and gone to bed. And her fascination with what was happening in the country, with the results as the night unfolded, was infectious to the point where I chose my current profession. And it's democratic. I cannot emphasise this enough. A delayed count, justified by all of the erroneous excuses to which I've already referred, would send out an appalling message to the country that the casting of your vote, that the country's decision as to which party should form the government is not important enough to do quickly. And it's certainly not as important as it has been in the past.
Here. I point out